I sit alone in the break room long after my shift has ended. The fluorescent lights overhead have that low, industrial hum that becomes almost hypnotic if you listen long enough. It's nearly midnight. The hospital is quieter now, reduced to the soft beeping of monitors down distant hallways and the occasional crackle of the intercom calling someone to a wing I'll never visit. I should have left 2 hours ago. I know that, but I can't seem to move. My wedding ring sits on the table beside a paper cup of coffee that went cold sometime around 10. I took it off without thinking, the way you might remove a watch that's suddenly too tight. Now it just sits there, a small circle of gold catching the dim light, and I can't bring myself to put it back on. My reflection stares back at me from the vending machine glass across the room. The man looking back doesn't feel like me. He looks tired, older than 36, like someone who's been holding his breath for years and has only just realized it. Earlier today, I was assigned a new patient. His name is Julian Hart, early 40s. Car accident. They brought him in 3 days ago after his vehicle skidded off a wet road and wrapped itself around a tree. Broken ribs, fractured leg, concussion. He's stable now, but recovery will be slow. I've seen 100 cases like his. I should feel nothing beyond professional concern. But when I walked into his room this morning to check his vitals, something shifted. He was awake, sitting up slightly despite the pain it must have caused him. His face was bruised, a deep purple spreading across his left cheekbone, and there were bandages wrapped around his forehead. But his eyes were clear, sharp. He looked at me the way people don't usually look at nurses, like he was actually seeing me, not just the uniform. He smiled, just barely, and said something I didn't expect. He said I didn't look like someone who belonged in a place like this. I didn't know what he meant. I still don't. But the words stayed with me all day, echoing under my skin like a second heartbeat. Now I'm driving home through the rain. The windshield wipers carve out a rhythm that matches the thudding in my chest. Headlights from oncoming traffic bend and blur through the fog, turning the road into something dreamlike and unreal. I rehearse what I'll say to Clara when I walk through the door. I'll tell her there was a complication with a patient. I'll tell her the attending needed me to stay late for a consult. I'll tell her anything that sounds plausible enough to excuse the fact that I've been sitting in an empty room for 2 hours, staring at my own reflection and trying to remember the last time I felt like myself. But when I finally pull into the driveway and step inside, the house is dark. Clara is already asleep. I can see the shape of her under the blankets through the crack in the bedroom door. I stand there for a moment, my coat still dripping rain onto the hardwood floor, and I realize I'm relieved. Relieved that I don't have to lie tonight. Relieved that I don't have to pretend. I slip the ring into my pocket instead of putting it back on. It stays there all night. Somewhere in the space between waking and sleep, a memory surfaces. It's old, maybe 10 years now. I was 26. There was a man, a friend, or someone I wanted to be more than a friend. We were sitting in his car after a late movie, rain tapping against the roof the same way it is tonight. I almost said something. I almost told him what I'd been holding inside for months. But I didn't. The moment passed. A week later, I met Clara. A year after that, I proposed. I told myself it was what I wanted. I told myself I was happy. But that silence, the one from that night in the car, it never really went away. It's been sitting in my chest ever since, a wound that never healed. Just scar tissue and regret. And now, something about Julian's quiet presence, the way he looked at me like he could see through all the walls I've built, has reopened it. I don't know what it means yet. I don't know what comes next. But I know this. I can't keep pretending the ring fits the way it used to. I lie awake in the dark, listening to Clara's breathing in the next room, and I wonder if she knows. I wonder if some part of her has always known. My life has always been orderly. Almost painfully so. If you walked through my house, you'd see what I mean. The wedding photos on the mantel are arranged in descending chronological order. The towels in the bathroom match, cream and sage, carefully folded. The kitchen counters are always clear. Even the books on the shelf are organized by height, not by author or subject, because Clara prefers the way it looks. Symmetry, balance, control. These are the principles that govern our home, and for years I convinced myself they also govern my happiness. Clara is kind. I need to say that first because it's true, and because what comes later might make it seem otherwise. She's kind in the way that good people are, thoughtful, considerate, never cruel. She remembers birthdays. She asks about my day. She folds my laundry without being asked. But somewhere along the way, the warmth between us dulled. It wasn't dramatic. There was no fight, no betrayal, no moment where everything shattered. It was more like a slow fade, the way colors drain from a photograph left too long in the sun. We eat dinner together most nights. She sits across from me at the table, and we talk about ordinary things. Her work at the nonprofit, my shifts at the hospital, the neighbor's dog that won't stop barking. But even as we speak, there's a distance between us that feels impossible to cross. We're polite. We're parallel. We exist in the same space, but never quite touch. We don't have children. When people ask, we say it was a mutual decision. We're focused on our careers, we tell them. We like our freedom. But the truth is more complicated than that. I think we both knew, on some level, that bringing a child into this quiet, careful life would only magnify what was missing. Clara never pushed for it. Neither did I. And so the years passed, and the questions stopped coming up, and the spare bedroom became an office that neither of us really uses. At work, I'm known as reliable. That's the word people use. Dependable. Steady. What they mean is predictable. I show up on time. I follow protocol. I don't make waves. My colleagues respect me in the distant way you respect someone who never surprises you. I've been at the same hospital for 11 years. I know the routines so well I could navigate them in my sleep. Sometimes I think I do. The hospital has become both my refuge and my prison. It's the one place where I can lose myself completely in the act of caring for others. When I'm checking vitals, adjusting IVs, charting symptoms, I don't have to think about the emptiness waiting for me at home. I don't have to face the fact that I've built a life around avoidance. I just move from room to room, patient to patient, doing the work that needs to be done. It feels safer that way, easier. But then Julian arrived, and everything I'd carefully constructed began to crack. He came in on a Tuesday morning, transferred from the ICU after 3 days of stabilization. Car accident, like I said. The attending briefed me quickly: fractured femur, broken ribs, concussion, lacerations. Standard post-trauma care. I'd handled dozens of cases like his. I went into his room expecting routine. What I found was anything but. Julian was a literature professor before the accident. I learned that from his chart first, then from him. He taught contemporary American fiction at a small college an hour north of the city. He was driving home from a faculty retreat when his car hit a patch of black ice and went off the road. He doesn't remember the impact. Just the moment before, headlights, the sensation of losing control, and then waking up in the hospital with a body that no longer felt like his own. His recovery was slow. The leg would take months to heal properly. The ribs ached with every breath. But his mind was sharp. Sharper than mine, I thought. He noticed things. The way I hummed under my breath when I was focused on changing in 4-line. The way my shoulders tensed when I entered a room. The way my eyes softened, just for a second, when I thought no one was looking. Our first real conversation happened 3 days after he was transferred to my floor. I came in to check his vitals, and he asked me if I liked what I did. It wasn't the usual small talk. There was weight behind the question. I told him I did, that helping people mattered to me. He nodded slowly, then said something I wasn't expecting. He asked if I ever felt like I'd taken a wrong turn somewhere, and now I just kept driving because stopping would make it real. I didn't answer. I finished checking his blood pressure, made a note on his chart, and left the room. But the question stayed with me. It followed me through the rest of my shift, into my car, into my house. That night, lying in bed beside Clara, I thought about all the wrong turns I'd taken. All the moments I'd chosen silence over truth. And I wondered if Julian could see it in me, the weight of all those unspoken things. The days that followed began to develop a rhythm. I'd start my shift, make my rounds, and inevitably find myself spending more time in Julian's room than was strictly necessary. We talked about small things at first. Books he was reading, music he missed listening to, the strange, disorienting experience of being trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate. But gradually, The conversations deepened. He told me about his divorce, finalized 2 years before the accident. He told me about the loneliness that had settled into his life like dust. He told me he'd stopped painting after the split, even though it was something he'd loved since childhood. I told him almost nothing personal. I kept my answers vague, professional. But somehow, he seemed to understand anyway. He saw through me in a way that was both terrifying and oddly comforting. Like he knew exactly what I was running from, even if I couldn't say it out loud. One afternoon, I found him trying to stand on his own. His leg was still too weak, and he nearly fell. I caught him, his weight pressing against me for just a moment, and I felt something shift. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a revelation. It was just the simple, undeniable fact that I didn't want to let go. I think that's when I realized I was in trouble. Not because of what had happened, but because of what I wanted to happen. And wanting, I'd learned long ago, was dangerous. Weeks pass in a kind of suspended animation. Julian's recovery progresses steadily. The bruises fade from purple to yellow to nothing. The bandages come off. He starts physical therapy, learning to walk again with the help of a cane and, more often than not, my arm. There's an intimacy in those sessions that I don't know how to name. The weight of his body leaning into mine. The careful coordination of our steps down the hallway. The way he grips my shoulder when the pain flares up, and the way I instinctively slowed down to match his pace. We don't talk much during those walks, but the silence between us feels different than the silence at home with Clara. It's not empty. It's full of things we haven't said yet, things that hang in the air like humidity before a storm. I start to look forward to those moments more than I should. I start to time my rounds, so I'm the one who assists him. I tell myself it's because I'm his primary nurse, because continuity of care matters. But I know that's not the whole truth. One evening, near the end of my shift, Julian asks me to stay. He says he's been cleared to go home soon and needs help reviewing his discharge plan. It's a reasonable request, standard procedure. But when I enter his room, I find something unexpected. He's sitting by the window in the chair we use for physical therapy, and on the small table beside him are 2 cups of tea, steam rising in delicate spirals. In the corner, on a portable record player that I didn't know he had, a jazz record spins softly. Miles Davis, I think. Something slow and melancholic. He gestures to the empty chair across from him. Sit, he says. Just for a minute. I should say no. I should tell him I have paperwork to finish, another patient to check on, a wife waiting at home. But I don't. I sit. The tea is chamomile. He tells me a friend brought the record player during visiting hours, along with a small stack of albums. Something to make the room feel less like a hospital, he says. I ask him if it's working. He smiles, really smiles, not the polite half-smile I'm used to seeing, and says it helps. Then he laughs, low and unguarded, and I realize it's the first time I've heard him laugh. The sound does something to me. It loosens something in my chest that I didn't know was clenched. We don't talk about discharge plans. We talk about everything else. He tells me about teaching, about the strange intimacy of standing in front of a room full of students and trying to make them care about books written by dead people. He tells me about his divorce, how it wasn't anyone's fault, just 2 people who woke up one day and realized they'd been lying to each other for years. He tells me about the accident, how in the split second before the car hit the tree, he felt a strange kind of clarity, like his life was flashing before him. But instead of seeing what he'd done, he saw all the things he hadn't. I listen. I don't offer much in return. But Julian doesn't seem to need me to. He talks like he's been holding these words inside for a long time, and now that they're finally coming out, he can't stop them. And I realize I'm doing the same thing, listening like I'm starving for it. For honesty. For someone who isn't afraid to admit they're lost. At some point, the tea goes cold. The record finishes and starts over. The light outside the window shifts from pale gray to deep blue. I glance at my watch and realize I've been sitting here for over an hour. I tell him I need to go. He nods, but as I stand, he says something that stops me. He says I'm the only person who looks at him like he's still here. Not like a patient. Not like someone broken. Just here. It's meant as gratitude, I think. A simple acknowledgement. But it lands like a confession. Like he's telling me he sees me too. And in that moment, I don't know what to do with the weight of it. I leave without saying anything. I walk down the hallway in a daze, past nurses and patients and the relentless hum of machines, and I feel like I'm moving through water. By the time I reach the parking lot, my hands are shaking. A week later, Julian is discharged. I'm not there when he leaves. I traded shifts so I wouldn't have to be. I tell myself it's easier this way. Cleaner. But on my next shift, I find a note taped to my locker. It's folded carefully, my name written on the outside in handwriting I recognize from the charts I've been filling out for weeks. I open it in the break room, alone. Inside is an address. Nothing else. Just a street and a number in the part of the city where old row houses have been converted into apartments. At the bottom, in smaller letters, he's written, "In case you ever want to talk outside of fluorescent lights." I stare at the note for a long time. Then I fold it back up and slip it into my pocket. I tell myself I'll throw it away, that this is where it ends, that I'll go back to my orderly life, my quiet marriage, my predictable shifts, and I'll forget about jazz records and chamomile tea and the way someone looked at me like I mattered. But I don't throw it away. The note stays in my pocket. Then it moves to my wallet. Then to the drawer of my bedside table, tucked under a stack of old receipts where Clara will never find it. That weekend, Clara mentions she's going to visit her sister upstate. She'll be gone Friday through Sunday. She asks if I'll be okay on my own. I tell her, of course, that it'll be nice to have some quiet time. She smiles and kisses my cheek, and I feel like the worst person in the world. On Friday night, after she's gone, I sit on the couch with the note in my hand. I trace the edges with my thumb. I think about all the reasons I shouldn't go. I think about vows and promises and the life I've built. I think about the man I was 10 years ago, sitting in a car in the rain, too afraid to speak. And then I think about Julian's voice saying I'm the only person who looks at him like he's still here. I get up. I put on my coat. I drive across the city with my heart pounding so hard I think I might be having a heart attack. And when I finally find the address, I sit in my car outside for 20 minutes, trying to convince myself to turn around. But I don't. I get out. I walk up the steps. I knock on the door. And when Julian opens it, surprised and cautious and something else I can't quite name, I realize I've already made my choice. I made it weeks ago, in a hospital room with 2 cups of tea and a record spinning in the corner. I just didn't know it yet. Julian's apartment is nothing like I expected. Nothing like the sterile precision of the hospital, nothing like the careful restraint of my own home. It's warm, cluttered in the way that speaks of a life actually being lived. Books are stacked on every available surface, on shelves, on the coffee table, on the floor beside the couch. The walls are painted a soft cream color, and sunlight pours through the windows even though it's evening, caught and reflected by the glass in the frames of old photographs. There's a smell in the air, coffee, cedar, something else I can't quite place. It smells like comfort, like safety. He invites me in without asking why I came. Maybe he already knows. Maybe it doesn't matter. I step inside and he closes the door behind me, and for a moment we just stand there in the small entryway, neither of us quite sure what happens next. He moves carefully through the apartment. The limp is still noticeable, the cane clicking softly against the hardwood floor. But there's a dignity in the way he carries himself, a quiet acceptance of his body's limitations. He offers me coffee, and I accept. We sit at the small table by the window, the same window where he sat in the hospital room, and I realize he's recreated that moment. 2 cups. Soft music playing from a speaker somewhere in the apartment. The space between us charged with everything we haven't said. We talk about nothing important at first. How he's adjusting to being home. How physical therapy is going. The books he's been meaning to read. But gradually, the conversation shifts. He asks me about my life outside the hospital, and I find myself telling him things I've never told anyone. About the weight of routine. About the feeling of being trapped in a life that looks perfect from the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. About the fear that this is all there is, that I've already made all my important choices, and now I'm just living out the consequences. He listens the way he did in the hospital. Not with judgment, not with pity, just with presence. And when I finally stop talking, he tells me something I wasn't expecting. He says he understands. That he spent 15 years in a marriage where he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. And by the time he finally admitted the truth, he'd almost forgotten what the truth looked like. I ask him what changed. He's quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the street below. Then he says it wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small moments of realizing he was suffocating. And one day, he just couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't keep lying. Not to his wife. Not to himself. I don't say anything. But I think he knows what I'm feeling. The recognition. The terror. The desperate hope that maybe it's not too late. I start finding reasons to come back. It begins innocently enough, or at least that's what I tell myself. He mentions he's running low on the pain medication from the hospital, so I offer to drop some off. Then it's groceries. He's still not steady enough to carry heavy bags, so I stop by after work to help. Then it's just checking in, making sure he's managing okay, making sure the physical therapy isn't too much. But we both know what's really happening. These visits aren't about medical care. They're about something else entirely. Something neither of us is quite ready to name. His apartment becomes a second home. I learn the rhythms of his life. The way he makes coffee in the morning, strong and black. The way he reads with his feet tucked under him on the couch. The way he pauses sometimes, mid-sentence, to find the right word. He starts painting again. Small canvases at first, just abstract shapes and colors. Then landscapes, views from his window, the park across the street, light falling through trees. I watch him work, and I feel something inside me reawaken. It's not desire exactly, or not just desire. It's yearning, a deep, aching want for something I've denied myself for so long I'd almost forgotten it existed. I want to be seen. I want to be known. I want to stop pretending that the life I've built is the life I actually want. One evening, I arrived to find him at the piano in the corner of his living room. I didn't even know he played. He says he hasn't touched it since before the accident, but his hands remembered. He plays something slow and melancholic, something that sounds like it's from another era. I sit on the couch and close my eyes, and I feel my throat tighten with an emotion I don't know how to name. When the music stops, I open my eyes and find him looking at me, really looking at me, the same way he did that first day in the hospital when he told me I didn't look like I belonged there. And I realize he was right. I don't belong in the life I've been living. I never did. I can't do this, I whisper. The words come out before I can stop them. He doesn't move. Doesn't try to convince me, or argue, or plead. He just looks at me with those careful, understanding eyes and says, "You already are." And he's right. I am already doing this. I've been doing it for weeks. Every time I drive across the city to see him. Every time I stay longer than I should. Every time I lie to Clara about where I've been. I'm already in this, already falling, already past the point of turning back. The guilt comes in waves. At home, Clara asks if I've been working late again. I nod, and the lie tastes like ash in my mouth. She mentions that I seem distracted lately, and I tell her I'm just tired. She accepts this because she always accepts my explanations. She trusts me, and that trust is a knife turning in my chest every time I walk out the door to see Julian. I start noticing small things. The way Clara folds my shirts in a specific pattern. The way she sets the table for dinner even when we're just eating leftovers. The way she kisses my forehead before bed. A gesture that's become more habit than affection. These things used to feel like love. Now they just feel like evidence of how far apart we've drifted. One morning, I come home from Julian's apartment and realize I smell like his place. Paint and cedar and coffee. I change my clothes quickly, but Clara is already awake. She's making breakfast, and when I walk into the kitchen, she glances at my sleeve. There's a smudge of blue paint there, the same shade Julian was using the night before. She doesn't say anything, just looks at it for a moment, then back at her eggs. The silence is sharp, cutting. I mumble something about helping a friend move some furniture, and she nods. But I can see it in her eyes. The doubt. The beginning of suspicion. She knows something is wrong. She just doesn't know what yet. At work, I begin to falter. I forget to chart a patient's vitals. I mix up medication schedules. I'm late to rounds. My supervisor pulls me aside and asks if everything is okay at home. I tell her it is, but she doesn't look convinced. One of my colleagues, Naomi, catches me in the break room one afternoon. She's older, wiser, the kind of person who sees through pretense. She sits down across from me and says, quietly, that I look like someone trying to keep a secret too heavy to carry. I don't confirm or deny it. I just sit there, staring at my hands, and wonder how much longer I can hold all of this inside before it tears me apart. That night, I'm back at Julian's apartment. We're sitting on the floor surrounded by his half-finished canvases, and the light from the setting sun is turning everything golden. He's telling me about a student of his, someone who wrote a paper about the concept of home in contemporary literature, about how home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's a feeling. Sometimes it's just the space where you're allowed to be yourself. And I realize, sitting there on his floor with paint-stained hands and my heart hammering in my chest, that this is the first place in years where I've felt like I could be myself, where I don't have to perform or pretend or hide, where I can just exist fully and completely without apology. I look at him, at the way the light catches in his hair, at the careful way he's watching me, and the words come out before I can stop them. I've never loved anyone the way I love you. The silence that follows is absolute. The words hang in the air between us like something fragile and dangerous. I wait for him to pull back, to tell me this is moving too fast, to remind me that I'm married and this is wrong. But he doesn't. He just reaches across the space between us and takes my hand. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life, about who I am, about what I want, about what I deserve, comes undone. Beautiful, he whispers. Unbearable. Irreversible. And I know he's right. There's no going back from this. No pretending it didn't happen. No returning to the safe, orderly life I built to protect myself from this exact moment. I've crossed a line I didn't even know I was approaching. And now I'm standing on the other side, terrified and exhilarated and more alive than I've felt in years. The affair doesn't begin in passion. It begins in surrender. A quiet evening, a glass of wine, and the confession I made on Julian's floor still echoing between us. We sit close enough that our shoulders touch, and the simple proximity feels like the most radical thing I've ever done. When he finally reaches for my hand again, his fingers trembling slightly as they curl around mine, something inside me breaks open. Not violently, more like ice melting, like something frozen finally returning to water. Our first touch is reverent, almost sacred. He lifts my hand to his lips and presses a kiss to my knuckles, and I feel tears burn behind my eyes. It's not lust that drives this moment. It's recognition. Two people finally acknowledging what they've both been too afraid to name. When we kiss, it's tentative and careful, like we're both aware of how fragile this is, how easily it could shatter. But it doesn't shatter. It deepens. And for the first time and longer than I can remember, I feel completely present in my own body. We move slowly. There's no rush, no urgency, just the quiet unfolding of something inevitable. Later, lying beside him in the darkness of his bedroom, I trace the scars from his accident, the one on his shoulder, the long line across his ribs, and I think about how broken things can still hold beauty, how wounds can heal even when they leave marks. He runs his fingers through my hair and tells me he never expected this, never expected me, and I realize I never expected myself either. The days that follow blur together in a way that feels both dreamlike and hyperreal. I start living two lives. The one at home with Clara, where I move through the motions with increasing detachment, and the one with Julian, where every moment feels vivid and immediate and terrifyingly real. I invent new lies, new excuses. I tell Clara I've picked up extra shifts, that the hospital is understaffed, that there's a patient who needs specialized care only I can provide. She believes me because she wants to, because the alternative is too painful to consider. But every time I leave Julian's apartment and return to the house I share with my wife, the weight of deception grows heavier. I feel split down the middle. Part of me is reborn, alive in a way I haven't been since I was young enough to still believe in the possibility of happiness. The other part is rotting from the inside out, corroded by guilt and shame and the knowledge that I'm destroying something that didn't deserve to be destroyed. Clara isn't a villain. She isn't cruel or cold or unloving. She's just someone who married a man who was never fully honest with her, who said yes to a life he didn't actually want because it seemed easier than saying no. And now she's paying the price for my cowardice. One morning, After a night spent at Julian's, I come home to find Clara standing in the kitchen holding one of my shirts. There's a paint smudge on the sleeve. Blue. The exact shade Julian was using 2 nights before when we stayed up late talking about nothing and everything, surrounded by canvases and wine glasses and the feeling that time had stopped. She doesn't say anything at first, just holds up the shirt and looks at me with an expression I can't quite read. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. I tell her I was helping someone from work, that they were painting their apartment and needed an extra pair of hands. The lie comes easily now. Too easily. She sets the shirt down carefully and asks if I want breakfast. I say no. The silence between us is sharp enough to draw blood. At the hospital, I'm unraveling. I forget to follow up on lab results. I miss a medication allergy in a chart and nearly cause a serious error. Naomi catches it before any harm is done, but she pulls me aside afterward, and the concern in her eyes is almost unbearable. She tells me I need to get whatever's going on under control, that I'm going to hurt someone if I keep working like this. She doesn't say it, but I know what she means. I'm going to hurt myself. I think about taking time off, about stepping back from everything and trying to figure out what I actually want. But I can't. The hospital is the only neutral ground I have left. The only place where I'm not actively lying to someone I care about. Julian senses the distance growing. He sees it in the way I hesitate before answering his texts, in the way I flinch when he touches me sometimes, like I'm bracing for punishment. One evening, he sits me down and asks me directly if I'm okay. If this is too much, if I need to stop. I want to say no. I want to tell him that being with him is the only thing that makes sense anymore. But the words stick in my throat. Instead, I tell him I don't know how to do this. How to be in 2 places at once. How to love him while still being married to someone else. How to rebuild my life when I'm terrified of what the rubble will look like. He doesn't try to convince me to stay, doesn't plead or make promises. He just holds my face in his hands and says, quietly, that I don't have to choose him. I just have to choose the truth. Whatever that truth is. It's the hardest thing I've ever heard. And the truest. That night, I don't go home. I don't go to Julian's either. I just drive. Through the city, past the suburbs, onto back roads that wind through forests and fields. I drive until I run out of road, until I'm parked on the shoulder with nothing but darkness ahead of me. And then I sit there, hands gripping the steering wheel, and I let myself fall apart. I cry for the life I thought I wanted. For Clara, who deserves better than this. For the years I spent hiding. For the man I could have been if I'd been brave enough to be honest. I cry until there's nothing left inside me but exhaustion and clarity. When dawn comes, pale and cold, I drive to the ocean. It's an hour away, but I need to see it. I need to stand at the edge of something vast and indifferent and remember that the world is bigger than my fear. I park at an empty beach and walk down to the water. The wind is sharp, smelling of salt and seaweed. The waves crash against the shore in a rhythm that feels ancient and relentless. I think about Julian saying I need to choose the truth. And I realize the truth isn't that I love him. The truth is that I've been lying to myself for most of my adult life. That I built a marriage on a foundation of avoidance and convinced myself it was enough. That I've been so afraid of disappointing people, of being seen as selfish or wrong, that I forgot to ask what I actually wanted. Love, I realize, isn't an escape. It's not a way to avoid the hard work of being honest. It's a reckoning. It's standing in front of another person and saying, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is what scares me. And hoping they'll still be there when you're done. I stay at the beach until the sun is fully up, until the sky turns from gray to pale blue. Then I get back in my car and drive home. Not to Julian's apartment. To the house I share with Clara. Because if I'm going to choose the truth, it has to start there. With the person I've been lying to the longest. When I walk through the door, Clara is sitting at the kitchen table. There's a cup of coffee in front of her, untouched. She looks up when she hears me, and I see in her eyes that she already knows. Maybe she's known for weeks. Maybe longer. Maybe some part of her knew from the very beginning that I was never fully hers. I sit down across from her, and for a long moment, neither of us speaks. Then she asks, her voice quiet and steady, if it's him. The person I've been spending all this time with. the one with the paint. I can't lie anymore. I can't tell her it's nothing, that she's imagining things, that everything is fine. So I just nod. She doesn't cry. She doesn't yell. She just sits there, looking at me like I'm someone she used to know. And in that silence, everything ends. Not with a fight, not with drama, just with the quiet, devastating acknowledgement that we've been living separate lives for longer than either of us wants to admit. And somehow, that makes it hurt even more. The conversation with Clara lasts for hours. We sit at the kitchen table as morning light fills the room, and we talk about everything we've avoided for years. She tells me she felt it long before she saw the paint on my sleeve. The distance. The way I stopped being present even when I was home. The way I looked at her like I was seeing through her instead of seeing her. She says she tried to convince herself it was just stress from work, that we were going through a rough patch, that it would pass. But deep down, she knew. She asked me how long it's been going on. I tell her the truth. About Julian. About the hospital. About the way something shifted inside me the first time we spoke. She listens without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, and when I'm done, she's quiet for a long time. Then she asks the question I've been dreading. She asks if I love him. I could soften it. I could tell her I'm confused, that I don't know what I'm feeling, that it's complicated. But I've done enough lying. So I tell her yes, I love him. And in the silence that follows, I watch her face crumble just slightly, like something inside her has finally broken. She doesn't ask me to leave. She tells me to. Not with anger, but with a kind of exhausted finality. She says she needs me gone by the end of the week. That she'll stay with her sister while I pack my things. That we'll figure out the details later. The house, the finances, the divorce. But right now, she just needs space. She needs to not see my face every time she wakes up. I move out 3 days later. I find a small apartment near the hospital, a studio with bare walls and a view of the parking lot. It's nothing like the home I'm leaving behind, nothing like Julian's warm, book-filled space. It's just a place to sleep, a place to exist while I figure out who I am now that the life I built has collapsed. Julian comes to help me move. I told him he didn't have to, but he insisted. He still limps slightly, still uses the cane on bad days, but he carries boxes and hangs curtains and makes the empty space feel a little less hollow. When everything is unpacked, he makes us coffee and we sit on the floor because I don't have furniture yet. He doesn't ask me how I'm feeling. He just sits beside me, shoulder to shoulder, and the quiet presence is enough. But even with him there, I feel unmoored. I thought leaving Clara would bring clarity. I thought once I was free of the marriage, I could finally build something real with Julian. But the freedom I imagined feels fragile, conditional. I'm haunted by the look in Clara's eyes when I told her I loved someone else. I'm haunted by the years we spent together, the promises we made, the life we tried to build. I'm haunted by the knowledge that I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Julian senses it. He always does. One evening, about 2 weeks after I move out, he sits me down and says we need to talk. There's a gentleness in his voice, but also a firmness. He tells me he can feel the distance, that I'm physically present but emotionally somewhere else, that I'm clinging to what we have like it's a life raft, but a relationship can't be built on desperation. It has to be built on choice. He says he doesn't want me to be with him because I have nowhere else to go. He doesn't want to be the thing I run to because I'm afraid of being alone. He wants me to be with him because I've done the hard work of understanding myself. Because I've chosen this life, not just escaped the old one. I try to argue. I try to tell him I have chosen him, that leaving Clara was proof of that. But even as I say it, I know he's right. I left Clara, but I haven't left the guilt. I haven't left the fear. I'm still carrying all of it, and it's suffocating whatever we're trying to build. He reaches across the space between us and takes my hand. His voice is soft when he speaks again. He says I don't have to choose him, Elias. I just have to choose the truth. About who I am. About what I want. About what kind of life I can actually live with. It's the same thing he said before, but this time it hits differently. Because I realize he's not just talking about us. He's talking about me. About the work I need to do to become someone who can be in a relationship without drowning in shame. Someone who can love without feeling like a liar. That night, after he leaves, I sit alone in my empty apartment and I feel the weight of everything I've been avoiding. I've spent so much time running from my own truth, from the life I didn't want, from the hard conversations I was too afraid to have. And now I'm standing in the wreckage, and I don't know how to rebuild. I spend the next few weeks in a kind of limbo. I go to work. I come home. I see Julian, but less frequently. He's giving me space, and I'm grateful for it, even though it terrifies me. I'm afraid that if I pull back too far, I'll lose him. That he'll realize I'm too damaged, too complicated, too much work. But I also know he's right. I can't build something new while I'm still buried under the rubble of what I destroyed. I start seeing a therapist. It's something I should have done years ago, but I was too afraid of what I might uncover. Now I don't have a choice. I sit in her office once a week and I talk about things I've never said out loud. About the friend I never kissed 10 years ago. About the way I chose Clara because it felt safe. About the years I spent pretending I was someone I wasn't. About the guilt and the shame and the fear that I've ruined everything. She listens without judgment, and slowly, something begins to shift. I start to understand that I'm not broken. I'm just someone who spent a long time lying to himself. And the way forward isn't to find someone to fix me. It's to learn how to be honest. With myself. With the people I love. With the world. One night, I take a long walk through the city. It's late, nearly midnight, and the streets are mostly empty. The rain falls in a soft mist, coating everything in a silver sheen. I walk without destination, past the hospital where I met Julian, past the neighborhood where I used to live with Clara, past the coffee shop where Julian and I sat for hours talking about books and life and all the things we were too afraid to name. And somewhere in that walk, I feel something release. Not the guilt, that will take longer to fade, but the desperation, the clinging. The fear that I have to have all the answers right now. I realize that healing isn't linear. That becoming the person I need to be is going to take time. And that's okay. When I finally stop walking, I'm at the ocean again. The same beach where I came after the night I cried in my car. The same place where I realized love is a reckoning. I stand at the edge of the water and watch the waves roll in, constant and patient. The horizon is just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. I pull out my phone and text Julian. I tell him I'm sorry for pulling away, that I'm working on myself, that I don't know what the future looks like, but I want him in it. If he's willing to wait, if he's willing to let me figure this out. He responds almost immediately. Just 3 words. I'm not going anywhere. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I feel something like hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind, but the quiet, steady kind. The kind that says maybe, just maybe, I can survive this. Maybe I can build something real. Maybe I can be the person I've been too afraid to be. I stay at the beach until the sun rises fully, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Then I drive back to my small apartment, to my quiet life, to the hard work of becoming someone who can love without fear. It's not an ending. It's barely even a beginning. But it's something. And right now, that's enough. Months pass. Not quickly, but steadily. The way seasons change when you're not paying attention. Julian's leg heals completely. He walks without the cane now, though sometimes on cold mornings he still feels the ache where the bone was broken. He's back to teaching full-time, and when he talks about his students, there's a light in his eyes that wasn't there before. He started painting more seriously too. His apartment walls are covered with new work, landscapes, abstracts, portraits of people he remembers from different chapters of his life. The colors are brighter than they used to be. I still work at the hospital, still do the same rounds, check the same vitals, care for the same kinds of patients. But something has shifted in the way I move through those halls. I no longer hide behind my uniform. I no longer use work as an excuse to avoid myself. My colleagues have noticed the change. Naomi told me a few weeks ago that I seem lighter, more present. I didn't know how to explain it, so I just thanked her. I live simply now. The small apartment near the hospital has become home in a way the house with Clara never quite did. I have a bed, a table, a chair by the window where I drink my coffee in the mornings. I don't need much. The space feels honest, like it matches who I actually am instead of who I thought I should be. Julian and I still see each other, but it's different now. Steadier, less urgent. We're not rushing toward anything or running from anything. We're just here, learning each other in the calm that follows a storm. Some nights I stay at his place. Some nights he stays at mine. We cook dinner together and talk about our days and fall asleep to old jazz records. It's ordinary in the best possible way. We've weathered the hardest parts. The revelation. The guilt. The fear that what we had wouldn't survive outside the secrecy where it began. But it did survive. It changed, certainly. It grew up. But it's still here. And so are we. Last week, I did something I've been putting off for months. I drove to Clara's sister's house, where she's been staying while the divorce paperwork makes its way through the system. I texted her first, asking if she'd be willing to see me. She said yes. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our two locations. Neutral ground. She looked good. Different. Her hair was shorter, and she was wearing a sweater I'd never seen before. There was a softness to her that I remembered from early in our marriage, before things got complicated. Before I made them complicated, we talked for over an hour. Not about the divorce, not about what went wrong, just about life. She told me she's been seeing someone new, a woman she met through work. She said it slowly, watching my reaction, and I realized she was worried I'd judge her. I told her I was happy for her, and I meant it. I told her she deserves someone who can love her fully, without reservation. She smiled at that, sad but genuine. Before we parted, she said something I wasn't expecting. She said she hoped I found what I was looking for. That she understood, now, why I couldn't give her what she needed. That she didn't hate me. I felt my throat tighten. I told her I was sorry. For the lies. For the wasted years. For not being brave enough to be honest sooner. She nodded and said she was sorry too. For not seeing it. For not asking the questions she was afraid to ask. When I left, I didn't feel the crushing guilt I expected. I felt something closer to peace. Like a chapter had finally closed in the right way. Not with bitterness, but with understanding. That night, I walk along the beach. It's become a ritual of sorts. When things feel too heavy or too uncertain, I come here. I stand at the edge of the water and let the wind clear my head. Tonight, the air is cool and sharp, smelling of salt and seaweed. The sun is setting, turning the ocean into a sheet of gold and amber. I hold my hand out, palm up, and feel the wind brush against my skin. For the first time in years, it doesn't feel empty. I'm not reaching for something I don't have. I'm just here, present, whole. When I get home, I notice the wedding ring still sitting on my windowsill. I've kept it there since the night I first took it off in the hospital break room. Next to it is the seashell Julian gave me one afternoon when we walked this same beach together. He said it reminded him of the way light changes depending on the angle you look at it. That nothing is ever just one thing. I pick up both objects, the ring and the shell, symbols of what was lost and what was found. I hold them in my palms for a moment, feeling their weight. Then I slip the ring into a small box in my desk drawer. Not thrown away, not forgotten, just put to rest. The shell stays on the windowsill, catching the fading light. I stand by the open window, eyes closed, and I breathe. Deeply, slowly. The kind of breath that reaches all the way down to the parts of yourself you've spent years ignoring. And I realize something simple but profound. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of being seen. Not of being honest. Not of living the life I actually want instead of the life I thought I was supposed to want. I hear my phone buzz. A text from Julian. Just checking in. Asking how it went with Clara. Asking if I want company tonight or if I need space. I smile and tell him company sounds good. That I'll make dinner. That I'll see him soon. I set the phone down and look out at the street below, at the ordinary evening unfolding in all its quiet beauty. People walking dogs. Cars passing. The sky slowly darkening. And I feel something I haven't felt in longer than I can remember. I feel like myself. Finally, completely, unapologetically myself. The wind picks up slightly, rustling the curtains. I let it wash over me, cool and clean and full of salt. And I stand there, breathing, quiet, free.